Okay, uh, class. Today we will do chapter four. Yeah, what is chapter four? Chapter four deal with the internal analysis. And before we start, every of the strategy that we want to do, we normally do external or internal analysis. We covered external analysis last week. So we start with now internal analysis. What is internal analysis? Internal analysis examine our organization internal environment in order to assess the resources, competency, and as well as competitive advantage. Now, performing an internal analysis allow us to identify the strength and weaknesses of our organization. This knowledge that we have would then be helpful in terms of our strategic decision making, while we later on carry on our strategy formulation and execution. So in this lecture, yeah, we will look into why internal analysis is important in before we make what we call effective strategy. Why is it important for us to do this before we embark into developing strategy? And we will then actually revisit the tools that we will use while conducting internal analysis. Now, when we talk about internal analysis, normally it will be complementing external analysis. So you have the external analysis, the pastel and the portal five forces. Now you have what we call the internal analysis. Now the internal analysis actually deal with the capabilities of the organization. You remember that last 2 weeks we talked about resource view. Yeah, from the resource we will actually have what we call competitive advantage, and from that competitive advantage we'll develop our strategy, and then the development of the execution plan. So in terms of the internal analysis, we would like to highlight the company or the organizational strength and weaknesses in the area of what they are good at, the skill, the knowledge that they have, their people, the resources that they have, and how this will eventually develop the company competitive advantage and as well as sustain competitive advantage. Now, um, normally in the beginning, uh, we will like to see uh, our own capabilities. We like to see our own capabilities. Remember, business is about competitive advantage and sustain competitive advantage. And if we were to actually look into the resource view, the competitive advantage come from within the organization. We need to say the organization themselves develop those competitive advantage. Yeah. So when we do internal analysis, what are the tools that we use? Yeah. Now, of course, we can use SWOT, SWOT. This time around, we focus on strength and weaknesses. We focus on strength and weaknesses. We can also use gap analysis. Gap analysis actually is an internal tools which allow organization to identify performance deficiencies, expected versus actual. So when we talk about gap analysis, it's about the process of comparing where we are now, our current state, to where we want to go, the future state. Eh, And then we will actually identify and understand those gaps that exist between the two states. And then we create a series of action that will bridge those identified gap, closing the gap. Now, this is important because it helps the management identify if the company is performing to its potential or not. And then if not performing, why is it not performing? This will eventually help to identify what would be the flaw in resource allocation in terms of their people, the capital, to enable them to do a proper planning, proper planning for effective production of product and services. Now, uh, this is the reason why we actually do internal analysis, and later on what you will do is that you will actually look into four elements. The management, first of all, is the management. We look into the capability of the management. We look into the capability of the marketing. We look into the capability of finance, and we look into the capabilities of the operations. Each of these four perspectives will actually enable us to identify what would be our strong points. Is the management actually a strong point? Is it something that would create competitive advantage? What about our marketing, our product, our services? Is it something that have competitive advantage or not? So all of this, yeah, will be actually discussed in this chapter. So I have several other videos that I will share with you later on, and I hope that you will be able to understand, and correlate between external and internal. Remember, external talk about pastel and Porter 5 forces, whereas internal talk about the SWOT, especially in terms of the internal, i.e., strength and weaknesses. Strength and weaknesses. You can also actually use gap analysis. A gap analysis. Now, the next tools that you can use is what we call the VRIO framework. Now, remember, when we do internal analysis, we want to find out what is our resource-based competitive advantage or resource-based sustained competitive advantage. Now, in many organizations, what we are looking for is that niche or the things that we have that people do not have, that will be able for us to be in front of our competitors, right? But then again, when we create a competitive advantage over a saturated market like mobile phone, hotel, whatnot, technology advancement means it's never long before that competitor will be able to replicate what we do, to replicate our competitive advantage. Yeah. So if that is the case, we will lose our sustained competitive advantage. So when we talk about the VRIO framework, right? VRIO framework stand for valuable, rare, inimitable, organized. Yeah. So meaning to say, we need to look into, in terms of our internal capabilities, what is valuable for us that can create that competitive advantage. What is rare? What is something that cannot be replicated? What is there that is organized for us to be able to use, to capitalize, to be ahead in terms of our competitive advantage? Yeah. So when we talk about a valuable, what is valuable? So when we talk about valuable, it must provide us with some sort of benefit. Yeah? Um, if let's say we have a resource that is valuable, but then it doesn't fit into the uh, dimension of our business, that is not competitive advantage, right? Or we can have, for instance, we have a very good system, but then again, we cannot use that system to create or to create markets and whatnot. So it will be worth less to have that as a competitive advantage. It must be hard to replicate. It must be hard to replicate. It must be difficult to replicate. Yeah. Um, because if you replicate it, it might be too expensive for the competitor. Eh? If let's say I actually share with you, kalau goreng buat bisnes goreng pisang senang nak replicate, but then again if you are doing something that is more high tech, it's difficult for you to replicate. And then again, it must be organized to capture value. The thing is, all of these things that you have, actually something that you have valuable, hard to imitate, or whatnot, must be organized. You can actually must be what we call it manipulated, able to manipulate, so that you will have profits from the value that you have. Yeah. So these are actually the what we call something that you have actually read, should have been read on the second module. Whereas this is what we call the uh, resource-based competitive advantage. You should read it later on. Okay, now I stop here for discussion. Yeah, and then we have a couple more videos for you to actually have a look at. Right, we will do the discussion, and then of course we will actually do some exercise as well.